everyone, hope you're all okay. I'm back to read you another bedtime story, but this time it's Mr. Stink by David Williams. It's about a little girl called Chloe who doesn't have any friends, and she makes a friendship with a man called Mr. Stink who lives on the streets. The first chapter is called Scratch and Sniff. Mr. Stink stank. He also stunk, and if it is correct English to say he stinked, then he stinked as well. He was the stinkiest stinky stinker who ever lived. A stink is the worst type of smell. A stink is worse than a stench, and a stench is worse than a pong. And a pong is worse than a whiff, and a whiff can be enough to make your nose wrinkle. It wasn't Mr. Stink's fault that he stank. He was a tramp after all. He didn't have a home, and so he never had the opportunity to have a proper wash like you and me. After a while, the smell just got worse and worse. Here is a picture of Mr. Stink. He was quite a snappy dresser in his bow tie and tweed jacket, isn't he? But don't be fooled, the illustration doesn't do justice to the smell. This could be a scratch and sniff book, but the smell would be so bad that you'd have to put it in the bin, and then bury the bin very deep underground. That's his little dog with him, the Duchess. The Duchess wasn't any particular breed of dog. She was just a dog. She smelt too, but not as bad as Mr. Stink. Nothing in the world smelt as bad as him, except his beard. His beard was full of old bits of egg and sausages and cheese that had fallen out of his mouth years before. It had never ever been shampooed, so it had its own special stink, even worse than his main one. One morning, Mr. Stink simply appeared in the town and took up residence on an old wooden bench. No one knew where he had come from, or where he might be going. The town folks were mostly nice to him. They sometimes dropped a few coins at his feet before rushing off with their eyes watering. But no one was really friendly towards him. No one stopped for a chat. At least, not till the day that a little girl finally plucked up the courage to speak to him. And that is where our story begins. "Hello," said the little girl, her voice trembling with a little bit of nerves. The girl was called Chloe. She was only 12 and she had never spoken to a tramp before. Her mother had forbidden her to speak to such creatures. Mother even disapproved of her daughter talking to kids from the local council estate, but Chloe didn't think Mr. Stink was a creature. She thought he was a man who looked like he had a very interesting story to tell. And if there's one thing Chloe loved, it was stories. Every day she would pass him on his dog in her parents' car on the way to her posh private school. Whether in sunshine or snow, he was always sitting on the same bench with his dog by his feet. As she luxuriated on the leather of the back seat with her poisonous little sister Annabelle, Chloe would look out of the window at him and wonder. Millions of thoughts and questions would swim through her head. Who was he? Why did he live on the streets? Had he ever had a home? What did his dog eat? Did he have any friends or family? If so, did they know he was homeless? Where did he go for Christmas? If you wanted to write him a letter, what address would you put on the envelope? The bench, you know, the one around the corner from the bus stop? When was the last time he had a bath? And could his name really be Mr. Stink? Chloe was the kind of girl who loved being alone with her thoughts. Often she would sit on her bed and make up stories about Mr. Stink. Sitting on her own in her room, she would come up with all kinds of fantastical stories. Maybe Mr. Stink was a heroic old sailor who had won dozens of medals for bravery. But he found it impossible to adapt to life on dry land. Or perhaps he was a world-famous opera singer who one night, upon hitting the top note in an area at the Royal Opera House in London, lost his voice and could never sing again. Or maybe he was really a Russian secret agent who had put on an elaborate tramp disguise to spy on the people of the town. Chloe didn't know anything about Mr. Stink, but what she did know on that day when she stopped to talk to him for the first time was that he looked like he needed a £5 note she was holding much more than she did. He seemed lonely too, not just alone, but lonely in his soul. That made Chloe sad. She knew full well what it was like to be lonely.